The Goosebumps anthology series by R.L. Stine is one of the most successful media franchises of all time, terrifying generations of children. But do you know about the masks featured in its 11th entry? Who made these masks, and which ones are the most well designed? Let's put on our overalls, say trick or treat, and find out. If you're a very nostalgic person like me, you've probably reread the Goosebumps series as an adult, and if you have, you'll know that the Haunted Mask is one of its best entries. That isn't mask-related bias on my part. The Haunted Mask is the best because it's structured much better than other Goosebumps stories, which, as much as I love them, tend to lack subtext and depth. Let me show you what I mean. In The Haunted Mask, the protagonist is Carly Beth. She's both meek and overreactive, making her the perfect target for bullies. Because she always gets picked on, she's desperate to seem intimidating. She decides to wear the titular Haunted Mask because it looks scary and she wants to be scary. The antagonist is the mask itself. It wants to become part of Carly Beth forever, so it fuses to her head. Not only does the mask physically transform Carly Beth into a monster, but it also makes her more aggressive and violent. This is a strong narrative. The mask isn't just a physical threat, it symbolizes Carly Beth's warped sense of self. Let's compare this to the sequel, The Haunted Mask 2, which isn't as interesting. The protagonist is Steve. He's a prankster who has to coach a kid's soccer team as punishment for his bad behavior. He buys a mask because he wants to get revenge on the bratty kids by scaring them. However, the mask doesn't turn Steve into a monster, it turns him into an old man. What does Steve turning into an old man symbolize? Nothing. In a better written story, Steve might be afraid of the responsibility of taking care of little kids, or he might feel like he's growing up too fast when he's forced to give up his pranks. But the story isn't about those things. You could replace Steve with a different main character, or have the mask transform him into something other than an old man, and nothing would really change. I bring all this up to say that The Haunted Mask is a pretty interesting story, at least the original is. As such, I want to see how different people have reimagined it over the years. This video will therefore serve as a chronological breakdown of different versions of the Haunted Mask, analyzing how it has been illustrated on various Goosebumps covers and reimagined for various Goosebumps adaptations. For what it's worth, this video concept has been done many times before, but I want to go a little more in depth and give my perspective as someone with an interest in masks. But before I begin, let me tell you how Stine describes the mask so we have a baseline idea of what they should look like. This is how he describes Carly Beth's mask. It had a bulging, bald head. Its skin was a putrid yellow-green. Its enormous sunken eyes were an eerie orange and seemed to glow. It had a broad, flat nose, smashed in like a skeleton's nose. The dark-lipped mouth gaped wide, revealing jagged animal fangs. And here's how he describes Steve's mask. It was an ugly mask of a leering old man, his mouth twisted in an evil grin. One long, crooked tooth stuck out over his lower lip. The mask had long, stringy yellow hair that drooped down over the old man's craggy forehead. There were black spiders climbing in the hair and in the ears. A chunk of forehead was missing, revealing a patch of gray skull underneath. So, with those descriptions in mind, let's take a look at every official Goosebumps adaptation and reprint and decide which haunted masks are the scariest, prettiest, and most loyal to Stine's writing. The Haunted Mask 1993 American release by Tim Jacobus. Like with most Goosebumps covers, the original Haunted Mask was illustrated by Tim Jacobus. This version is iconic and would go on to inform countless other interpretations. Although Carly Beth was modeled after Jacobus's niece, the mask was his original invention. I knew where I wanted to go with it, so that one is just very organic. I didn't see anything or copy anything, Jacobus explained. Even though he had his own vision for how the mask should look, it still matches Stine's descriptions very closely. Jacobus did multiple alternate concept sketches for this cover, but I'm glad he chose this one because it's striking. The bright colors are quintessentially Goosebumps, and even though there were a million other haunted masks to follow, it's still one of the scariest and most interesting to look at. The Haunted Mask 1994 British release. British Goosebumps covers are notoriously ugly among horror fans. So very, very ugly. And the Haunted Mask is no exception. I really don't have much to say about this cover except for the fact that the artist is uncredited, and I can see why. The Haunted Mask 2, 1995 American release by Tim Jacobus. The original cover for The Haunted Mask 2 was also painted by Tim Jacobus. While it's relatively faithful to Stine's description, it's more childish than the first cover and overall not as appealing. I think the strange perspective is the biggest misstep, as it makes Steve's head look unnaturally large. There's some Lamentation of Christ vibes, to use a popular art history example. It's just weird. I prefer this concept sketch because the perspective is less exaggerated and the mask's expression is less goofy. Part of that is that the snaggletooth is missing, which is less accurate to Stine's vision, but it's also less silly. The Haunted Mask 1995 French release by Jean-Michel Nicollet. The first French release of The Haunted Mask is my favorite Goosebumps cover. it might be my favorite book cover of all time, period. The stippling and muted colors remind me of James Hardman's landscapes of the San Juan Islands, and they give the whole image an amazing luminous quality. The mask itself isn't as over-the-top scary as some other depictions, but there's something uniquely off-putting about its slack-jawed expression. I think the fact that it's more human than other versions, and therefore kind of falls into the uncanny valley, is what makes it so effective. And of course, the pumpkin and silhouetted houses in the background give the whole cover that quintessential Halloween vibe. It's perfect. The Haunted Mask 1995 Dutch release by Herman Tilp. I can appreciate this cover. For one thing, it's painted, which I always enjoy. It speaks to the pulpiness of the series in a great way, and in general, I wish the publishing industry would bring back original paintings for book covers. Also, the mask is hidden. While I would prefer to see the mask, it's a smart choice to leave it to the reader's imagination, which will always be scarier than anything an artist can create. In short, the best design is no design. Where this cover loses me is its composition, which feels very stiff. The best works of art use composition to imply movement if they're trying to be tense, but this image is too motionless to be scary. The Haunted Mask 1995 television adaptation by Matthew DeWilde and Ron Stefaniuk. Considering the Haunted Mask's narrative quality, it's no wonder it was chosen as the basis for the pilot of the Goosebumps TV show. I mean, what better way to hook in new viewers? The construction of the mask is explained in detail by its prop auction listing. Originally painted a pale flesh tone with purple, maroon, and black details, green paint was increasingly added as the mask began to take over Carly Beth. A combination of Pax paint and rubber mask grease paint were used to give the mask the wet look. I know people have a lot of nostalgia for this mask, but I have to admit, I don't love it. However, I don't think that's due to it being badly designed. In fact, it's a great design. The problem is that the Haunted Mask is a hard story to adapt because you run the risk of the mask just looking like a cheap rubber Halloween mask. And that's exactly what happened. That being said, the special effects do help sell Carly Beth's transformation. For example, they add green skin below her neck to demonstrate that she's fully transformed, and I'm pretty sure they gave her colored contacts for the scene where she realizes her eyes have changed. So even though this mask isn't my personal favorite, it deserves an A for effort. The Haunted Mask 2 1996 television adaptation by Ron Stefaniuk. This mask has the same rubbery fake look as the last one, but otherwise I love it. The expression is perfect, like it's groaning in pain. Also, the use of real spiders is wonderfully creepy. But the best thing about this mask is that it actually fits the story. In adapting The Haunted Mask 2 for TV, the writers changed Steve's motivation for buying the mask. Instead of wanting revenge against bratty kids, he's afraid of growing up too fast, and he wants to buy a scary Halloween costume to make the most of the holiday while he's young enough to enjoy it. That's a great change, and one that makes this design work so much better in context. The Haunted Mask 2 1996 French release by Gérard Philly. The original French printing of The Haunted Mask 2 was short-lived. I saw a lot of sources claiming that this cover was pulled for being too scary, but I couldn't find a primary source to confirm it, so take that with a grain of salt. I personally don't think the cover is that scary compared to other Goosebumps covers, but maybe that's just me. The thing that stands out about this iteration of the Haunted Mask is that Steve's hair shows underneath, which doesn't sell the old man transformation as well as it could, especially since the stringy yellow hair is one of the mask's distinctive features. The whitened out eyes are nice and creepy though. The Haunted Mask 2 1997 French release by Gérard Philly. Philly's redo of his Haunted Mask 2 cover, ostensibly to be less scary, was successful at being less scary, I guess. It sucks. The mask looks nothing like the way Stine described it, and the changes such as the arched eyebrows and nubby teeth just look silly. Even the non-masked character on the left, who I think is supposed to be Carly Beth, looks exaggerated and cartoony. It's a no from me. The Haunted Mask 1997 Norwegian release. This art style is so specific that I can't decide if I like it or not. The shading is flat, there's weird smear effects, and the lines are rough and sketchy. It's like someone drew it in MS Paint. But that's also what I like about it. It's kitschy and weird. I can almost see a pop artist painting a reproduction of this cover a la Roy Lichtenstein. As for the mask itself, it's basically just a less detailed version of Jacobus's, so I don't have much to say on it. By the way, I couldn't figure out who designed this cover, so if you own this edition, please tell me. The Haunted Mask Lives by Tim Jacobus. In 2000, there was supposed to be a book called The Haunted Mask Lives released as part of a new limited Goosebumps series. Although the series was cancelled and the books were never written, Tim Jacobus did do artwork for it. I'm torn on this cover. Get it? I like the violence of the mask being ripped apart, but there is weird details that are really distracting. Like, where's the orange light coming from? Why is the mask missing the back of its mouth? I think this cover could have worked, but it needed some edits. The Haunted Mask 2001 French release. The second French version of The Haunted Mask is a major downgrade. Let's start by looking at Carly Beth's clothes. They aren't a little girl's clothes. With the blazer and necklace, they're more like office wear, and the mask itself is so goofy looking. The frizzy hair stands out to me as the weirdest choice, considering it has nothing to do with anything described in the book. As for who designed this cover, I'm not sure. I've seen both Jean-Michel Nicolet and Gerard Failly credited, but it's unclear who actually did it. Either way, I'm not a fan. The Haunted Mask 2008 American release by Brandon Dorman. Because it's such an iconic story, it's no wonder The Haunted Mask was chosen as one of the Goosebumps books to get a re-release. The new art was done by Brandon Dorman, who effectively replaced Tim Jacobus as the go-to American Goosebumps artist for years. And while Dorman did some good covers, this one is pretty bad. The design of the mask itself is nice and scary with the exaggerated teeth and downturned eyes, and it matches Stine's description. But Carly Beth's pose isn't intimidating at all, and the fact that she doesn't seem to be getting any reaction from the other kids adds to the impression that she's just not scary. The Scream of the Haunted Mask 2008 release by Brandon Dorman. For this cover, Dorman reused his design of the Haunted Mask from the last book, which, like I've said, is an effective design. I also like the composition of this cover with the mask front and center in a sea of other masks. I just wish the art style was a little more realistic. The cartoonishness robs a lot of the fear factor, and the end result is a whole lot of meh. Goosebumps Most Wanted: The Haunted Mask 2012 release by Brandon Dorman. This is our third Brandon Dorman release in a row, and it's my favorite of them so far. It puts the mask front and center and lets you appreciate the details. That being said, the cover is a victim of the Most Wanted branding, with the paper background in Old West style woodblock type. Oddly enough, this is the only Most Wanted cover to use this style, so it stands out even more in comparison to the other more conventional covers. If this cover had been allowed to be its own thing, I would probably like it more, but as it is, it's just okay. The Haunted Mask 2014 Korean release by Oh Yoon-hwa. Unlike most Goosebumps books, the Korean editions of Goosebumps are illustrated. The style is unique and expressive, with large eyes and small mouths that give the characters a doll-like quality. This style is especially fitting for the Haunted Mask's themes of fragility and childhood revenge, so overall, my feelings are positive. The weak point, however, is the illustration of the mask on the cover. Inside the book, the mask is drawn great, but on the cover, it's too cutesy for my taste. I think kids are drawn towards things like Goosebumps because they want to feel brave, so a less intense cover is a misstep. It Came from Ohio 2015 release by Brandon Dorman. This is the same as Dorman's other Haunted Masks, and I don't feel like talking about it. The Haunted Mask 2015 Indonesian release by MT. If there's one thing that fascinates me about this edition, it's that the mask in question differs so much from other depictions. Instead of looking like a Halloween mask, it looks more like a traditional Indonesian mask. In particular, the addition of facial hair and the broad nose stand out to me as matching Balinese styles. It's a cool example of how things change when adapted to a different cultural context, as traditional masks might be more recognizable to Indonesian audiences. If I'm nitpicking this design though, one thing I don't like is the addition of the giant spider, since spiders are supposed to be part of Steve's mask. Goosebumps 2015 film. In 2015, a film was released that featured various Goosebumps monsters as antagonists. One of these was Carly Beth herself wearing the haunted mask, and I think the effects look great. The prosthetics blend seamlessly with the actress's face to create the impression of one solid piece that is fused with the skin. Also, I like the denim costume, which is a nice little nod to the original Tim Jacobus cover. I just wish this design was featured more, considering it's barely in the film at all. Goosebumps Horror Town 2017. I can't speak for the quality of this game because as far as I can tell, it's typical mobile game pay-to-win nonsense, but the design of the haunted mask is really nice. It's aggressive looking, and the differences that make it stand out compared to other versions are good differences. For example, this haunted mask doesn't have pointed ears. That's a great change, because pointed ears can add that sort of cheesy fantasy elf look that isn't particularly scary, so overall, good job. The Haunted Mask 2 2018 American release by Brandon Dorman. I've so far been somewhat unkind to Brandon Dorman's Haunted Mask illustrations, but this is the exception. This illustration fixes the issues of many other Haunted Mask 2 covers by giving the mask the creepiness it needs. The expression especially is just so delightfully evil. If I saw this mask in real life, I would actually think it was haunted. The Haunted Mask 2019 Vietnamese release by Titus Fair Supertramp. I love this cover. Does it look anything like Stine's descriptions? Not really, but it's so beautiful. The red details are super unique, and the torn edges remind me of Green Man masks, which is an interesting direction to take. Also, I love the little Carly Beth in the mask's mouth. Not only does it symbolize how the mask is consuming her, but the pose really shows how afraid she is. And she's in overalls as a nice nod to the original cover. That's great. The Haunted Mask 2 2019 Korean release by Oh Yoon-hwa. Like the original Korean release, I feel pretty positive towards this. It has the same style, but the mask is a lot creepier. Of course, like many Haunted Mask 2 illustrations, it doesn't match Stine's description super closely, but some little details like the stringy hair are there, and the black paint splatters could arguably represent spiders, so overall, pretty well done. The Haunted Mask 2023 French release by Servan Altermont and Paul-Émile Boucher. This cover is pretty solid. The stretched skin sells the claustrophobia and violence of trying to take off a mask that has become your skin. Plus, even though the teeth aren't sharp, the mask otherwise looks as described. However, I do wish that the image had a little more texture. This cover has a very smooth digital look that isn't very creepy and looks somewhat generic, especially compared to the unique styles of so many other Goosebumps covers. Goosebumps 2023 television adaptation. As much as I've used adaptational accuracy as a metric, I don't mind that this Haunted Mask is so different from other versions, especially since this is such a loose adaptation of the original story. I like the porcelain doll look, and I like how the mask is sculpted with multiple different expressions, all of which are creepy. However, I do have some critiques. For one thing, the prop isn't heavy enough. You can't really see it in still images, but the mask has no heft, which breaks the illusion that it's made of ceramic. For another, the CG effects when the mask finally transforms the main character into a monster are hokey at best. I think having the main character transform into something that looks like the mask a la William Tuttle's makeup effects in The Twilight Zone would have been a better choice. It would have made more intuitive sense in the story, it would have been creepier, and the effect could have been done practically, which would have eliminated that too smooth digital look. The Haunted Mask 2024 graphic novel adaptation by Maddi Gonzales. I have mixed feelings about this design. In general, I think Gonzales did a good job, as her art is bold, expressive, and everything else a graphic novel should be. But the mask is unfortunately the weak point. Like the original TV adaptation, part of that is just a limitation of the medium, because of course a cartoon looks cartoonish. But even so, there are some panels where the mask just looks so goofy that it's hard to get over. And that's too bad, because there are other panels where the mask is drawn really creepily, so I don't know what the cause of the inconsistency is. According to Gonzales herself, a lot of thought went into keeping the mask's look consistent, using a 3D model as a reference, so I don't want to harp on her too much, but still. The Haunted Mask 2 2025 French release by Servan Altermont and Paul-Émile Boucher. The last entry on this list is the most recent French release of The Haunted Mask 2. I don't like this cover. I don't know why they would copy the previous French Haunted Mask 2 cover when it was really ugly, but they did. Admittedly, it's an improvement over its predecessor though. The addition of the spiders and wispy hair to give it some accurate details is nice, but it still shares the problems with its related covers, namely that it's a bit too silly and that it has a weird smoothness to it. A not so great note to go out on. Is there any other version of the Haunted Mask you wanted me to discuss? Which Goosebumps book is your favorite? Let me know in the comments. This episode's charity shoutout is the Forest Healing Foundation, a non-profit organization protecting and restoring Kondyan forests in Sri Lanka. Deforestation has had devastating effects on the wildlife of Sri Lanka, including endemic tarantulas. Spiders may be considered creepy crawlies by many, but they are important to the environment and worthy of conservation efforts. Organizations like the FHF have done important work in saving the forests that spiders and other fauna occupy. A link to donate is in the description.